The ocean is full of secrets. There's a lot of stuff underwater, and some of it we haven't discovered yet. We know there's probably entire civilizations we haven't found because the ocean covers so much of our planet. We've only explored less than 5% of it, so there are a lot of things hiding down there. Some of them might even be treasure. But while the ocean has many secrets, it also has a lot of questions, ones that have been asked for decades with absolutely no answers. And one of those is a ship known as the Mary Celeste. If you haven't heard of the Mary Celeste before, prepare to get your mind blown, because this is a crazy tale of the seas. The year is 1872, and the Mary Celeste was sailing from New York to Genoa, Italy. She had traveled quite a bit across the world. She was a pretty good ship, having made the journey between Europe and America many times before. This time around, she was carrying 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol. The ship set off on October. On board were Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife Sarah, their 2-year-old child, along with 7 crew members. The ship would have been busy as they prepared the goods for sale in Italy. That would have taken up most of the workers' time. So the plan was that the captain's wife and daughter would stay in New York for now. They would wait for the ship to return and rejoin the family once it did. It would take roughly 3 months to reach Europe from New York, and they'd need to stay there for a bit. Then it would take another 3 months to come back. So it seemed like a good idea to leave the family behind for now. Most of the crew members were very familiar faces. They had worked with the captain for years and knew the seas like the back of their hands. First mate Thomas Nickerson was 23 years old and had sailed on many journeys before. He was responsible for helping the captain navigate the ship. The rest of the crew ranged from 20 to over 60 years old. The youngest was young Thomas, who was just 16. As far as anyone can tell, the Mary Celeste was a happy ship. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. All of the men wrote letters to their families back home, sending their love and saying they were excited to see them when they got back. The ship wasn't overcrowded, and everyone had enough to eat. There were no signs of tension or trouble among the crew. But 1 month after they left, everything changed. On December 4th, 1872, a ship spotted the Mary Celeste floating in the middle of the ocean. It was almost as if the ship was abandoned. The vessel's sails were torn, and the ship had clearly been drifting in the ocean for a while. But it was clear the ship had once been manned. Everything was in order. Things were in their places, and nothing appeared to be out of the ordinary. But there was no one there. When the crew arrived on the ship, they were shocked by what they found. The food was still on the table in the kitchen. Clothes were neatly hung in the closets, and personal belongings were in order. Even the ship's wheel was clean. There were no signs of a fight and no indication of what had happened to the crew. They checked everywhere but couldn't find any of the crew members anywhere. The ship's doctor, his medical bag, his books, and his notes were all still in his quarters. The ship's carpenter's tools were in the workshop, and the captain's personal diary was on the desk in his room. They even found his 2-year-old daughter's toys in her room. It was like everyone had just picked up and left in a hurry, except no one had. They checked the lifeboats and the ship's dinghy, but it wasn't there. They searched everywhere, but no one had gone anywhere. They looked through the ship's log and found the last entry was written on November. It said that the ship was doing well and everything was copacetic. After that, there were no other written entries. The ship's wheel was locked, which meant that no one had steered it for a long time. The vessel had been tossed around by the waves, but it hadn't sunk. It was intact, but it was obvious the ship was adrift and heading in the wrong direction. It had been pushed off course and was being blown by winds that had come from the northeast. The ship was sailing toward the Azores Islands, but it was obvious it needed help. The crew of the other ship stayed with the Mary Celeste for 3 weeks, hoping the crew would show up at any moment. But it never happened. Eventually, they realized the crew had truly been gone for a while, and no one had been on the ship since November. They continued on their way, leaving the Mary Celeste alone in the sea. Someone tried to claim the abandoned ship, but ownership was never confirmed. The ship was brought back to the United States, where it was insured for $2,500. Insurance adjusters came on board and searched for anything valuable that could explain what happened. But everything pointed to the fact that no one had looted the ship. If the crew had been scared or panicked and jumped into the water, someone would have been missing. But everything was still in place and accounted for. There were no lifeboats on the ship, and the weather was too rough for anyone to have survived the journey. One theory claimed that the ship had been filled with water and the crew escaped before it sank, but that didn't add up either. The ship was still afloat, although it was in worse shape than before. To this day, nobody knows what happened to the Mary Celeste. There was no sign of a storm when the other ship found it. So how did the crew disappear? Was it pirates, a monster, aliens? It's hard to say. For 150 years, people have speculated on what happened on the Mary Celeste, but no one really knows. The mystery continues to grow. In 1885, the ship was sold one last time. It was renamed the Amazon and went on one final voyage. It was scheduled to go from New York to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, but it never made it. A cyclone hit the ship, causing it to sink. Many of the crew members were lost. Only 4 people survived, and they told a story that was similar to the Mary Celeste. They said the ship was fine, but then suddenly a storm showed up out of nowhere. They said they had no control over the ship and were essentially caught in a storm that tossed them around the ocean. The ship eventually sank, and they were forced to jump into the water. Maybe the Mary Celeste had been cursed. Maybe it was doomed to wander the ocean with no one at the helm. But this final voyage proved it was more than just a legend. The Mary Celeste was a dangerous ship, and it would continue to be problematic until it was destroyed. So here's what we know. A ship set sail from New York to Italy. Everything was going well until November. 10 people disappeared, leaving behind a perfectly good ship. No one knows what happened to the crew, and no one knows what happened to the ship. The legend only grew after the mysterious disappearance, and many believe the ship was cursed. While we may never know the truth, we do know that there are lots of strange things happening in the ocean, things that we don't understand. The Mary Celeste may have been cursed, but it might have just been the circumstances. Sometimes we like a good, scary story, and the vastness of the ocean gives us plenty of material to work with. Let me know what you think happened to the Mary Celeste in the comments below. Now check out the weirdest things ever found beneath the ocean, or watch Most Mysterious Unsolved Cases in History.